They tried to steal my dead husband's invention while his body was still warm. The billion-dollar Radcliffe dynasty couldn't stomach their son marrying someone beneath them. So they weaponized the courts to seize my company and the technology worth millions. Forged documents. Bribed officials. Threatened investors. Poached researchers. They even tried taking my daughter, calling me an unfit mother with a straight face. I stood alone in that courthouse with nothing but truth against their wall of expensive suits. What would you do when your in-laws want to erase your existence and steal your life's work? When the last piece of your husband's legacy might vanish because you refuse to disappear? Sometimes justice wears a black robe and has a very personal stake in the outcome. Rain pelted against the windows of Mira Kapoor's tiny office as she stared at the bankruptcy court summons, her fingers trembling slightly against the crisp legal paper. The Radcliffe name was emblazoned across the letterhead like a declaration of war. After 3 years of strategic attacks on her fledgling business, they had finally moved for the kill. They really did it, she whispered to the empty room, the sound almost lost beneath the drumming of raindrops. They're actually trying to destroy everything I've built. The irony wasn't lost on her. James Radcliffe had been the one who believed in her brilliance from the moment they'd met in a crowded MIT lecture hall. He'd been the one who abandoned his family's pharmaceutical empire to start something revolutionary with her. And now, 3 years after his death, his parents were determined to erase every trace of their partnership, both professional and personal. Myra's gaze drifted to the framed photo on her desk. James with their daughter Zoe, both laughing at something outside the frame. His dark hair windswept, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he was truly happy. The photo had been taken just 2 months before the car accident that shattered her world. Her phone buzzed, jolting her back to the present. Liam Chen, her lawyer and oldest friend. "Tell me you've figured out a miracle defense," she answered, not bothering with pleasantries. "I wish." His voice was tight with frustration. "The Radcliffes have pulled strings to get Judge Harmon assigned to your case. Why does that name sound familiar?" She pressed her fingers to her temple, trying to recall where she'd heard it before. Because Harold Harmon vacations with Richard Radcliffe. They're golf buddies. The resignation in Liam's voice made her stomach clench. Their connections run deeper than friendship. Harmon's son works for a subsidiary of Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. Mira closed her eyes, the familiar weight of despair pressing against her chest. So that's it. They win again. Not yet. Paper rustled on Liam's end. There's been a last-minute change. Harmon recused himself this morning. We've been reassigned to Judge Elena Vega. And who does she vacation with? No one from the Radcliffe circle, as far as I can tell. She's known for being ruthlessly fair, impossible to bribe, and thoroughly prepared. A note of cautious hope entered his voice. She also has a background in biomedical research before she went into law. That could work in our favor. A small spark of hope ignited in Myra's chest. So we have a chance. A slim one. The Radcliffes have built a strong case that you've misappropriated their intellectual property. They're claiming James's research belonged to Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. But it didn't. Anger flared, momentarily displacing her fear. He left the company before developing the neural interface. We have the timeline documented. Documents can be challenged. Dates can be questioned. And the Radcliffes have very expensive lawyers who excel at creating doubt. Liam hesitated. There's more. They've added allegations of financial mismanagement and fraud to the bankruptcy petition. Fraud? That's absurd. Mira stood abruptly, pacing the small confines of her office. Our financial records are immaculate. You've seen them yourself. It doesn't have to be true to be effective, Mira. They just need to create enough smoke to convince the judge there might be fire. She halted before the rain-streaked window, staring at her faint reflection superimposed over the gray cityscape. The woman looking back at her seemed both familiar and strange. Thinner than she used to be, with shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before James died. But there was something else too, a hardness that had developed over 3 years of fighting simply to exist in a world that the Radcliffes controlled. "I'm not giving up," she said, steel replacing the tremor in her voice. "Neurotech isn't just a company to me. It's James's legacy for Zoe. Then we fight. Court date is Monday, 9 a.m. We're something powerful but not flashy. And Mira? Get some sleep. You'll need your wits about you." After hanging up, Mira moved to the small lab where her team of 5, all that remained after the Radcliffe systematic poaching of her top talent, worked on refining their neural interface prototype. The device, no larger than a hearing aid, represented a revolutionary approach to treating neurological disorders without invasive surgery. The lab itself told the story of their struggle. State-of-the-art equipment crowded alongside second-hand pieces. Pristine workstations next to taped-together older models. They'd been forced to downsize twice in the past year, moving from their original space to increasingly smaller facilities as investors pulled out under pressure from the Radcliffes. "Any progress?" she asked her lead researcher, Diane Liu, a brilliant neurologist who had left a prestigious position at Johns Hopkins to join Neurotech in its early days. "The latest algorithm adjustments are promising." Diane's eyes were shadowed from too many late nights. Her long black hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her lab coat had a coffee stain on the sleeve. "But we're running out of computing capacity for the simulations." Another consequence of the Radcliffes' campaign against her. 3 investors had pulled out last month after anonymous concerns about patent viability had circulated through the venture capital community. The last one had been especially painful, withdrawing a promised $2 million that would have funded their next phase of development. Focus on the pain management applications for now, Mira decided, studying the simulation data on Diane's screen. "If we can demonstrate effectiveness there, it might be enough." "For court?" Diane asked, her expression solemn. Everyone knew what was at stake. "For survival." The other researchers glanced up from their stations, the weight of the situation visible in their tense postures. They were more than employees, they were believers in what Neurotech could accomplish. And they were loyal to Mira in a way the Radcliffes could never understand or replicate with all their billions. "We'll get it done," said Martin, their youngest researcher, barely 2 years out of his PhD program. "The model just needs more fine-tuning." Mira managed a smile. "I know you will. All of you have accomplished the impossible already." She looked around at their tired but determined faces. "No matter what happens on Monday, what we've built here matters. The work we've done will change lives." Later that evening, after picking up Zoe from her after-school program, Mira tried to maintain a sense of normalcy as they prepared dinner together in their small apartment kitchen. "Can we have the pasta with the swirly sauce?" Zoe asked, standing on her step stool to reach the counter. "You mean pesto?" Mira smiled, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "Of course we can." "Yay! It's the color of Lily Pad's eyes." Lily Pad was Zoe's stuffed elephant, her constant companion since James had given it to her for her 4th birthday. Zoe chatted animatedly about her day at school as they cooked, her dark curls bouncing with each enthusiastic gesture. She had James's eyes, a piercing blue that seemed almost startling against her warm brown skin, but Myra's quick mind and expressive hands. "And then Ms. Rivera said my science project about the brain was the most detailed?" Mira offered, stirring the pasta. "Yes. The most detailed in the class. She said maybe I'll be a brain doctor like you and Daddy someday." Myra's heart clenched. At 8, Zoe remembered her father more as an idea than a person, her memories supplemented by photos and the stories Mira told her every night. "Your dad would be so proud of you, Bug." "I know." Zoe said it with absolute confidence. "He's watching from heaven and saying, 'That's my smart Zoe.'" After dinner and a story, Mira tucked Zoe into bed, making sure Lily Pad was securely under the covers beside her. "Mom." Zoe's voice was suddenly small. "Are you going to win against Grandma and Grandpa?" The question caught Mira off guard. She tried to shield Zoe from the legal battles, but children absorbed more than adults realized. "What do you know about that, sweetheart? I heard you talking to Uncle Liam on the phone." Zoe clutched Lily Pad tighter. "He said they want to take Daddy's invention away from you." Mira sat on the edge of the bed, carefully choosing her words. "It's complicated, Bug. Grandma and Grandpa think Daddy's invention belongs to their company because he used to work for them. But it doesn't," Zoe said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "Daddy made it with you after he left their company. He told me so." Myra's breath caught. "He did?" Zoe nodded solemnly. "When I asked why he didn't work in the big building with Grandpa anymore. He said he wanted to build something special with you instead, something that would help people with sick brains." Tears pricked Myra's eyes. James had been so careful to help their daughter understand the choices he'd made, even at such a young age. "That's right, Bug. And that's what I'm still trying to do. So you'll win, right? Because you're telling the truth and they're not. If only the world operated on a child's sense of fairness. I hope so. I'm doing everything I can." "Good." Zoe yawned, snuggling deeper under her covers. "Because Ms. Perez says rich people always get what they want, but I told her that's not true because my mom is smarter than anyone." Mira stroked her daughter's curls. "Ms. Perez doesn't know everything. Some things are more powerful than money. Like truth. And love. And science." Zoe added with a sleepy smile. "Especially science." Mira grinned, kissing her forehead. "Now sleep tight, Bug. We both need rest for our big days tomorrow." After returning to the kitchen, Mira spread court documents across the table. The Radcliffe strategy was clear: claim that James had developed the foundational concepts for neurotech while still employed by them, invalidate her patents, and absorb her company's innovations into their pharmaceutical empire. What the documents didn't show was the personal vendetta behind the legal maneuvers. Richard and Elaine Radcliffe had never approved of their son's marriage to Mira, the daughter of Indian immigrants who'd worked her way through MIT on scholarships. They'd tolerated her while James was alive, but his death had unleashed their true feelings. They blamed her for the accident, for being the reason James had left the family company, for existing at all. "Mom. Are you still working?" Mira looked up to find Zoe in the doorway, Lily Pad clutched to her chest. "Just for a little while longer, sweetheart. Why aren't you asleep?" "I had the dream again." Zoe climbed into her mother's lap, her small body trembling slightly. "The one where Grandma and Grandpa take me away from you." Myra's arms tightened around her daughter. The Radcliffes had tried that too, a custody suit alleging Mira was an unfit mother because of her demanding work schedule. They'd lost, but the fear remained, lodged in Zoe's subconscious. "That will never happen," Mira promised, kissing the top of Zoe's head. "You and me, we're a team. Nothing can change that. But they're really rich." "I know, Bug. But some battles can't be won with money." Zoe didn't look convinced. "They have a swimming pool inside their house. And horses. And a room just for watching movies. Those are nice things, but they don't make a home." Mira tilted her daughter's face up. "Home is where you're safe and loved. That's here, with me." After returning Zoe to her room and sitting with her until she fell back asleep, Mira returned to the kitchen table. She allowed herself 5 minutes, just 5, to feel the crushing weight of her situation. The Radcliffes had billions, an army of lawyers, and connections throughout the business and legal worlds. She had truth on her side, but was that enough? Her phone buzzed with a text from Liam, "Found something interesting about Judge Vega." Call me in the morning. Mira clutched the phone like a lifeline. One more day. One more chance to save everything that mattered. The next morning was a whirlwind of preparation. Mira dropped Zoe at her friend Maya's house, where she would stay during the court proceedings with Maya's mother, Sarah, one of the few friends who had stood by Mira through everything. "You've got this," Sarah said, hugging Mira at the door. "And if you don't, we'll figure it out together. That's what friends do." Mira swallowed the lump in her throat. "Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me, just win. And then we're celebrating with that ridiculous expensive wine I've been saving." Before meeting Liam at his office, Mira made a detour to the cemetery. She didn't visit James's grave often, it felt too final, too concrete. But today, she needed whatever strength she could draw from their connection. The morning was clear and crisp, the storm from yesterday having moved on, leaving everything washed clean. James's grave was simple, a flat marker with his name, dates, and the quote he'd chosen for himself years before in one of those late-night, what-if, conversations: "The universe is made of stories, not atoms." Mira knelt on the damp grass, not caring about her suit. "I'm fighting for us today, Jay. For everything we built together." A chickadee landed on a nearby branch, tilting its head as if listening. "I don't know if I can win, but I'm not giving up." The silence that answered her wasn't empty. It never was. Something about this place always made her feel that James was just out of sight, around a corner, about to appear with that grin that had captivated her from the first moment they met. "Remember when we pulled that all-nighter in the lab and you said our neural interface would change the world?" She traced his name on the cold stone. "I'm still making that happen. No matter what it takes." Liam's office was a stark contrast to the peaceful cemetery, buzzing with activity as his small team prepared their final strategy. "You look terrible," he greeted her, handing over a cup of coffee. "Good morning to you too." "Sorry. But seriously, did you sleep at all?" "A few hours." She took a grateful sip of the coffee. "What was the interesting thing about Judge Vega?" Liam led her to his office, closing the door behind them. "Her daughter has epilepsy. Severe, treatment-resistant." Mira set down her coffee. "Exactly the condition our interface could help with. Don't get your hopes up. She's known for her impartiality, and there's no guarantee she'll even make the connection. But if she does, she'll understand the real-world implications of what we're developing." Mira felt the spark of hope grow stronger. This isn't just about patents and corporate ownership. It's about patience. Exactly. And that's our angle today. Liam spread out his notes on the desk. "We focus on the humanitarian impact of your technology, the fact that the Radcliffes shelved similar research because it wasn't profitable enough, and the clear timeline showing development occurred after James left the company." "What about the fraud allegations?" Liam's expression hardened. "We counter with evidence of their interference. The anonymous reports to investors, the poaching of your employees, the mysterious audit triggers. Do we have proof?" "Circumstantial, but compelling when viewed together." He hesitated. "There's one more thing. I found out who's representing them." "Let me guess. Donovan?" "Yes. And he's bringing Jessica Wright as second chair." Mira felt her stomach drop. "My former classmate Jessica Wright? The one who dated James before you?" "Yes, that Jessica Wright. That's not a coincidence." "No, it's not. The Radcliffes are playing psychological warfare. They want to throw you off balance." Mira straightened her shoulders. "It won't work. Jessica was never the issue. The Radcliffes were." An hour later, they walked up the courthouse steps together, Mira in a simple navy suit that had cost a tenth of what Elaine Radcliffe would be wearing, but was the most expensive item in her wardrobe. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of marble and authority, its classical facade speaking of permanence and power. Mira felt small approaching it, a sensation that only increased as they passed through security and made their way to courtroom 3. Richard and Elaine Radcliffe were already seated with their legal team when Mira and Liam entered. Richard didn't even look in her direction, his silver hair and bespoke suit radiating wealth and confidence. Elaine, however, turned slightly, her cool blue eyes, so like her son's, assessing Mira with undisguised contempt. "Ignore them," Liam whispered as they took their seats. "Focus on Judge Vega. She's the only one who matters today." The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Elena Vega." The woman who entered was younger than Mira expected, perhaps early 50s, with streaks of silver in her dark hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. She surveyed the courtroom with an expression that revealed nothing of her thoughts. "Be seated," she instructed. "I've reviewed the filings in this case, and I have several questions before we proceed." She turned to the Radcliffe's lead attorney. "Mr. Donovan, your clients allege that the neural interface technology developed by Neurotech rightfully belongs to Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. On what grounds?" Donovan rose smoothly, his tailored suit and confident demeanor perfected over decades of high-profile corporate cases. "Your Honor, Dr. James Radcliffe developed the conceptual framework for this technology while employed by Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. His employment contract clearly stated that all intellectual property developed during his tenure belongs to the company. And your evidence of this timeline? We've submitted laboratory notes and meeting minutes documenting discussions of neural interface technology dating back to 2018, while Dr. Radcliffe was still Chief Research Officer." Mira tensed, fighting the urge to interrupt. The laboratory notes were discussions of theoretical possibilities, not actual development work. And the meeting minutes had been selectively edited to remove context. Judge Vega turned to Myra's table. "Ms. Kapoor, your response." Mira stood, acutely aware of the Radcliffe's dismissive glances. "Your Honor, while my late husband did participate in theoretical discussions about neural interfaces at Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals, the specific technology Neurotech has developed, a non-invasive, adaptive neural modulation system, was conceptualized and designed after he left the company in late 2019. We have his dated notebooks, witness testimonies from colleagues not affiliated with either company, and patent applications that clearly establish this timeline." The judge nodded, making notes. "Mr. Donovan, your clients also allege financial mismanagement and fraud as grounds for forcing Neurotech into bankruptcy proceedings. Please elaborate." For the next hour, the Radcliffe's attorney painted a picture of a failing company built on stolen ideas and kept afloat through creative accounting. With each accusation, Mira felt her chance of survival diminishing. The Radcliffes had constructed their attack meticulously, leveraging their connections to create a paper trail that, while largely fabricated, appeared damning. "Additionally, Your Honor," Donovan continued, "we have evidence that Neurotech has misrepresented the status of its clinical trials to investors, claiming progress that does not exist." Objection. Liam stood. "That claim is completely unfounded. The court will determine what is and isn't founded, Mr. Chen," Judge Vega replied evenly. "Please continue, Mr. Donovan." When it was Liam's turn to present their defense, he methodically addressed each allegation, but Mira could see the judge's expression growing skeptical. The weight of the Radcliffe name and resources was tipping the scales. "Your Honor," Liam concluded, "what we're witnessing here is not an attempt to protect legitimate intellectual property, but a systematic campaign to destroy Neurotech and appropriate its innovations. The Radcliffes have a personal vendetta against my client, who they never accepted as their son's wife." Objection. Donovan stood. "Counsel is making unfounded personal accusations." Sustained, Judge Vega ruled. "Mr. Chen, please restrict your arguments to the legal and financial matters at hand." As Liam sat down, Mira felt defeat settling over her like a shroud. The judge was following legal procedure, which meant the Radcliffes' carefully constructed case would likely prevail. "Before we continue," Judge Vega said, I'd like to better understand the technology at the center of this dispute. She turned to Mira. Ms. Kapoor, can you explain in layperson's terms what your neural interface does and how it differs from existing technologies? Mira rose, surprised by the request. Of course, Your Honor. Our device uses non-invasive electromagnetic pulses to modulate neural activity in targeted brain regions. Unlike existing technologies, which either require surgical implantation or provide only temporary relief, our interface adapts in real time to the user's changing neural patterns. As she spoke about the technology, Mira felt herself warming to the subject, her passion overcoming her nervousness. For conditions like epilepsy, chronic pain, or Parkinson's disease, this means continuous, personalized treatment without surgery or pharmaceutical side effects. And you have a working prototype? Yes, Your Honor. We've completed initial safety trials and are preparing for efficacy testing. Judge Vega leaned forward slightly. Did you bring this prototype to court today? Mira glanced at Liam, who looked equally confused by the question. No, Your Honor. It's secured in our laboratory. I see. The judge made another note. This court will recess for lunch. When we reconvene at 1:30, I'd like to see this prototype demonstrated. Can you arrange that, Ms. Kapoor? Heart racing, Mira nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, we object to this irregular procedure, Donovan interjected. The technology's functionality is irrelevant to the question of ownership. Judge Vega fixed him with a steady gaze. Mr. Donovan, I'll determine what's relevant in my courtroom. If your clients are claiming ownership of this technology, I want to understand exactly what we're discussing. Court is in recess. As people filed out, Richard Radcliffe finally looked directly at Mira, his expression a mixture of contempt and smug certainty. Enjoy your little science demonstration, he said as he passed. It won't change the outcome. Liam pulled Mira aside in the hallway. This could be good or bad. If the judge is impressed with your technology, it might humanize your case. But it could also convince her there's significant value worth transferring to the Radcliffes. I don't have a choice, Mira replied, already texting Diane to bring the prototype. At least this way, someone will see what we've actually accomplished before they take it away. The lunch break passed in a blur of activity. Diane arrived with their latest prototype, a sleek device about the size of a quarter that could be worn discreetly behind the ear. They ran through a quick check to ensure everything was functioning properly, then prepared the demonstration materials. Do you think this will help? Diane asked, her voice low as they waited outside the courtroom. I don't know, Mira admitted. But it's the only card we have left to play. When court reconvened, Diane sat nervously beside Mira, the neural interface device on the table before them. Ms. Kapoor, please proceed with your demonstration, Judge Vega instructed. Standing, Mira held up the device. Your Honor, this is the Neurotech Adaptive Neural Interface. It's designed to be worn behind the ear, where it can monitor and modulate neural activity in response to abnormal patterns. She handed a tablet to the bailiff. This displays the user interface that allows doctors to program initial parameters and patients to control intensity levels. And how would this help someone with, for instance, epilepsy? The judge asked, studying the device closely. The device detects the electrical activity that precedes a seizure and disrupts that pattern before symptoms begin. It learns from each intervention, becoming more effective over time. Mira hesitated, then added, for patients with treatment-resistant epilepsy, who might otherwise require brain surgery or live with unpredictable seizures, this could mean a normal life. Something flickered in Judge Vega's eyes, a momentary break in her judicial mask. Mira recalled what Liam had told her about the judge's daughter and felt a surge of hope. Does your device have any applications for chronic pain management? Judge Vega asked, her tone carefully neutral. Yes, Your Honor. By modulating activity in pain processing centers of the brain, it can provide relief without the side effects or addiction risks of opioid medications. From the corner of her eye, Mira saw Richard Radcliffe lean forward, suddenly more interested. Pain management represented a multi-billion-dollar market. One Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals had been trying to penetrate with limited success. "I have one more question," Judge Vega said, setting down her pen. "Ms. Kapoor, what motivated you to focus on this particular technology?" The question caught Mira off guard. It seemed personal, outside the scope of the legal issues at hand, but something in the judge's expression made her answer honestly. "My husband, James, watched his mother die from complications of Parkinson's disease. The available treatments either didn't work or caused debilitating side effects." Mira swallowed hard. "We promised each other we'd find a better way. After he died, continuing this work became my way of keeping that promise, to him and to all the patients who need a solution." Judge Vega nodded, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for the demonstration, Ms. Kapoor. You may be seated." The remainder of the afternoon proceeded with technical arguments about patent filings and financial statements. By 4 o'clock, Myra's hope had again diminished. The judge had given no indication of which way she was leaning. "I'll issue my ruling tomorrow morning," Judge Vega announced. "Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. That evening, Mira sat with Zoe on their small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah had dropped Zoe off after dinner, giving Mira a reassuring hug and a bottle of wine, just in case. "Mom, if you lose the company, will we have to move?" Zoe asked, leaning against Myra's shoulder. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe." Mira stroked her daughter's hair. "But home is where we're together, not a specific place. Would Dad be sad if the Radcliffes take his invention?" The question pierced Myra's heart. "Your father believed in helping people more than making money or getting credit. He'd be sad about the patients who wouldn't be helped, but he'd tell us to keep trying, to start again. Like when my science project broke before the fair, and we stayed up all night making a new one. Exactly like that." Mira smiled at the memory. "Your dad used to say that setbacks are just data points, not destinations. I don't want to live with Grandma and Grandpa." Zoe's voice was small but determined. "They never smile. And Grandma doesn't like my curly hair." Myra's arms tightened around her daughter. "You won't have to live with them, Bug. The custody case is over. They lost. But what if they try again? Then we'll fight again." Mira kissed the top of her head. "And we'll win again." After Zoe was asleep, Mira poured herself a small glass of Sarah's wine and tried to prepare herself for either outcome. If she lost Neurotech, she would need to start over completely. Maybe academia, though the Radcliffes had enough influence to make even that difficult. Or she could leave the country altogether, take Zoe somewhere the Radcliffe reach wasn't as extensive. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Judge Vega's daughter was hospitalized with status epilepticus last month. 3rd time this year. Don't give up. She stared at the message, unsure what to make of it or who had sent it. Was it encouragement from an unknown ally? Or was someone suggesting the judge might be biased in her favor due to personal circumstances? Either way, it changed nothing about her approach. Tomorrow, she would face whatever ruling came with her head high, knowing she had fought honorably for James's vision and their daughter's future. The courtroom was packed the next morning. Word had spread about the high-stakes battle between David and Goliath, the widow entrepreneur versus the pharmaceutical billionaires. Mira noticed several science reporters in attendance, along with what appeared to be venture capitalists and industry executives. Liam squeezed her hand under the table. "Whatever happens, you fought a hell of a fight. James would be proud." The mention of her husband steadied her. "He always said the only failure is giving up." All rise for the Honorable Judge Elena Vega. When Judge Vega entered, the room fell silent. Her expression was impossible to read as she took her seat and arranged her notes. "Before I deliver my ruling," she began, I want to address some unusual circumstances surrounding this case. Myra's pulse quickened. Last night, I received a phone call from Richard Radcliffe. The judge's voice was measured but carried an edge of steel. Mr. Radcliffe suggested that, given my daughter's medical condition, I might appreciate the societal benefits of Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals acquiring the neural interface technology. He offered to ensure she received priority access to the treatment once developed. Gasps and murmurs filled the courtroom. Richard Radcliffe's face had gone pale, then mottled red with anger or embarrassment. Your Honor, Donovan began, half rising from his seat. I'm not finished, counsel. Judge Vega's tone silenced him instantly. This was a transparent attempt to influence judicial proceedings. In most circumstances, I would recuse myself and refer the matter for criminal investigation. She paused, her gaze sweeping the courtroom. However, having reviewed all evidence thoroughly before this improper contact occurred, I believe justice would be better served by proceeding with my ruling, which was already prepared. Mira held her breath as the judge continued, her hand finding Liam's under the table and gripping it tightly. This court finds that Neuroteca's neural interface technology was developed after Dr. James Radcliffe left Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. The patent applications and laboratory notes clearly establish this timeline. Furthermore, the allegations of financial impropriety appear to be manufactured, with evidence of deliberate interference in Neuroteca's business relationships by the plaintiffs. Hope surged through Myra's chest as Judge Vega continued. Therefore, I am dismissing the bankruptcy petition with prejudice. Additionally, I am referring Richard and Elaine Radcliffe to the Securities and Exchange Commission for investigation of market manipulation and to the Bar Association for ethics violations related to their legal team's conduct. Richard Radcliffe stood abruptly. This is outrageous. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Radcliffe, or I'll have you removed. Judge Vega's voice was ice. There's more. Mira squeezed Liam's hand so hard she feared breaking bones as the judge continued. Having witnessed the demonstration of Neuroteca's technology, I believe the company has developed an innovation of significant medical importance. The court recognizes not only Neuroteca's legal right to this intellectual property but also the public interest in seeing this technology developed without further interference. Judge Vega turned directly to Mira. Ms. Kapoor, this court cannot undo the harassment and sabotage your company has endured, but I am issuing an injunction prohibiting the Radcliffes or their associates from any further interference in your business. Additionally, I am awarding punitive damages in the amount of $20 million, to be paid by Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals to Neurotech within 30 days. The courtroom erupted in commotion. Reporters rushed for the doors to file their stories, the Radcliffe's attorneys huddled in emergency conference, and Elaine Radcliffe appeared to be having a whispered but intense argument with her husband. Mira sat stunned, unable to fully process what had just happened. $20 million. Enough to complete clinical trials, expand her team, bring their device to the patients who desperately needed it. We won, Liam whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Mira, we actually won. Ms. Kapoor. Judge Vega's voice cut through the noise. A personal word, if I may. Approaching the bench, Mira noticed the judge had removed her robes, appearing suddenly more human, more vulnerable. Your ruling was based on the law, not your daughter's condition, Mira said quietly. I want you to know I understand that. A small smile touched Judge Vega's lips. The law and justice sometimes align perfectly. Today was one of those days. She paused. Off the record, my daughter's doctors have tried everything. When I saw your device yesterday, I'd be honored to have her evaluated for our clinical trial, Mira offered. Not as any form of gratitude, but because helping patients like her is why we exist. I appreciate that. The judge gathered her papers. Ms. Kapoor, what your late husband began and you've continued is remarkable. Don't let today's victory make you complacent. The Radcliffes lost a battle, not their power. I understand. As Mira turned to leave, Judge Vega added, one more thing. There's a man named Daniel Frost in the back row. MIT neuroscience professor. He's been watching your company's progress and expressed interest in collaborating. You might want to introduce yourself. Looking where the judge indicated, Mira saw a tall man with intelligent eyes and an expression of undisguised admiration. When their gazes met, he nodded in acknowledgement. Later, as reporters clamored for statements outside the courthouse, Mira stood beside Liam, still processing the magnitude of their victory. Mom! Zoe's voice cut through the crowd as she raced up the steps, Sarah trailing behind. Did you win? Did you save Dad's invention? Lifting her daughter into her arms, Mira felt tears of relief and vindication finally break free. We did, baby. We saved it. Over Zoe's shoulder, she spotted Richard and Elaine Radcliffe exiting through a side door, their empire dented but not destroyed. They would regroup, perhaps try again through different means. But today she had won. Ms. Kapoor. A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. Daniel Frost stood nearby, respectfully waiting to be acknowledged. I wonder if you might have time for coffee. I have some ideas about expanding your neural interface applications to pediatric patients. Mira set Zoe down, struck by the genuine interest in his eyes, not calculation or condescension, but authentic scientific curiosity and respect. Professor Frost, I believe I could make time for that conversation. As they exchanged contact information, Mira felt something unexpected unfurling in her chest, not just triumph or relief, but possibility. The possibility of partnerships based on shared vision rather than power. The possibility of expanding James's legacy beyond what either of them had imagined. The possibility of writing a new chapter in her story, one not defined by the Radcliffe's hostility but by her own strength and vision. Mom, are you crying? Zoe tugged at her hand. Happy tears, Mira assured her, bending to her daughter's level. Sometimes when you stand up for what's right, even against people who seem too powerful to fight, you discover you're stronger than you knew. Zoe considered this with the solemn wisdom of childhood. Like in my stories, when the heroes win even though the bad guys have all the power. Exactly like that. Mira smiled, taking her daughter's hand. Now, let's go home. We have work to do. But this victory, as sweet as it was, would prove to be just the beginning of Myra's battle with the Radcliffes. Because some people, especially those born into wealth and power, don't know how to lose gracefully. And Richard Radcliffe had never lost anything in his life. If you're enjoying this story about one woman's fight against corporate giants, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspirational stories of courage and perseverance. And leave a comment below. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who seemed too powerful to fight? I read every comment and would love to hear your stories. The $20 million check from Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals arrived exactly 30 days after the court ruling, delivered by courier to Neuroteca's modest offices. Mira stared at the amount, the string of zeros seeming almost surreal after 3 years of financial struggle. I still can't believe we won, Diane said, peering over Myra's shoulder at the check. And that they actually paid. They had no choice, Mira replied, though she shared Diane's sense of disbelief. The judge's ruling was clear, and even the Radcliffes can't ignore a direct court order. So what's our first move? Martin asked, excitement evident in his voice. The entire Neurotech team had gathered for this moment, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief, vindication, and cautious optimism. Mira laid the check on the conference table. First, we secure better facilities. This space was always meant to be temporary, and we need proper labs for the expanded clinical trials. She smiled at her small but dedicated team. Second, we hire back the researchers who were poached, plus additional staff. And third, we accelerate our timeline for FDA approval. What about partnerships? This came from Rachel, their operations manager, who had stuck with Neurotech even when her salary had to be cut by 30%. The vultures will be circling now that we've won and have funding. We'll be selective, Mira said firmly. No partnerships that don't align with our core mission. Money doesn't change who we are or what we're trying to accomplish. After the meeting dispersed, Mira sat alone in her office, the magnitude of their victory finally sinking in. She reached for her phone to call Liam, then hesitated, her finger hovering over Daniel Frost's name instead. They'd had coffee the day after the court ruling, which had turned into dinner when their discussion of neural pathway modulation became too extensive for a cafe setting. He was brilliant, passionate about his research, and refreshingly respectful of her expertise. There had been no condescension, no subtle mansplaining, just genuine scientific dialogue between equals. Before she could overthink it, she tapped his name. Daniel Frost, he answered on the second ring. It's Mira Kapoor. The check arrived. Congratulations. I assumed the amount was correct? Down to the penny. $20 million that the Radcliffes probably hoped would bankrupt us is now going to fund the completion of the very technology they tried to steal. His laugh was warm through the phone. Poetic justice at its finest. How does it feel? Surreal, she admitted. And a little terrifying. Suddenly having resources after operating on fumes for so long. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's understandable. The Radcliffes aren't known for taking defeat gracefully. A chill ran through her at his words, which echoed her own thoughts too closely. I was actually calling to follow up on our conversation about pediatric applications. Your insights were extremely valuable. I'm glad to hear that. In fact, I've been working on some simulations based on our discussion. Would you be interested in reviewing them? I would. Mira found herself smiling. How about dinner tomorrow? You can show me your simulations, and I can tell you about our new facility plans. It's a date, Daniel said, then quickly amended, a meeting. A professional dinner meeting. The awkwardness made him seem more human, less the polished MIT professor. A professional dinner meeting, Mira agreed, though something warm fluttered in her chest at his slip. I'll text you the details. After hanging up, she sat back in her chair, surprised by the lightness she felt. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to think about anything beyond survival, the possibility of a connection, even a purely professional one, with someone who understood her work felt like a luxury she'd almost forgotten she could have. Her phone rang again, this time with Liam's familiar number. Have you seen the news? He asked without preamble. No, I've been in meetings all morning. What's happening? Richard Radcliffe just announced his retirement as CEO of Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. Mira sat up straighter. What? Why would he step down now? The official statement cites personal reasons and a desire to focus on family concerns, but industry insiders are saying the board forced him out after the court fiasco. Apparently trying to bribe a federal judge was a bridge too far, even for them. Who's taking over? That's the interesting part. Not Elaine, which would have been the expected move. They're bringing in Gregory Walsh from Meridian Biotech. Walsh is brilliant, Mira said slowly, trying to process the implications. And he has a reputation for being ethical. Exactly. This looks like damage control. The board is trying to distance the company from Richard's actions and rehabilitate their image. Do you think this changes anything for us? Liam was quiet for a moment. I don't know. On one hand, Walsh doesn't have a personal vendetta against you. On the other, Richard and Elaine still control a significant portion of Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals stock, and they can exert influence even without the CEO position. After hanging up, Mira stared out her office window at the city skyline. Richard Radcliffe stepping down should have felt like another victory, but instead, it unsettled her. The Radcliffes were strategic players, and this move seemed too calculated, too deliberate to be simple defeat. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Neurotech leased a modern facility in the city's biotech corridor, tripled its research staff, and launched an expanded clinical trial program. The neural interface prototype underwent refinements based partly on Daniel's simulations, which had identified potential improvements in the algorithm's response to pediatric brain wave patterns. Daniel himself became a regular presence at Neurotech, initially as a consultant but increasingly as a friend. His expertise in neural oscillation patterns complemented Myra's background in bioelectrical engineering, and their collaboration quickly produced tangible results. The new algorithm has reduced latency by 37%, Myra announced one evening, looking up from her computer screen. They were working late in her office, takeout containers pushed aside to make room for laptops and data sheets. "That's remarkable," Daniel said, moving to look over her shoulder at the simulation results. "Especially for pediatric application, where response time is critical." Myra nodded, acutely aware of his presence behind her, the subtle scent of his cologne mingling with the coffee they'd been drinking. The faster response time could be the difference between catching a seizure before it begins and merely shortening its duration. "You're thinking of Judge Vega's daughter?" "Among others. We've had 7 epilepsy patients enrolled in the trial for 3 weeks now. The preliminary data is promising, but not yet where I want it to be." Daniel's hand came to rest on her shoulder, a gesture of support that felt both natural and startling. "You're putting immense pressure on yourself, Myra. This technology is revolutionary even in its current form." She turned to face him, suddenly realizing how close they were. James used to say that, good enough isn't good enough when people's lives are at stake. He sounds like he was an exceptional man. Daniel's voice was gentle, with no trace of jealousy or discomfort at the mention of her late husband. "He was." Myra smiled at the memory. "Brilliant, driven, but also kind. He believed science should serve humanity, not the other way around. A philosophy you clearly share." Daniel's eyes held hers. "It's one of the things I admire most about you." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither of them seemed ready to articulate. Finally, Myra looked away, focusing back on the screen. "We should test these parameters on the actual device tomorrow," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Of course." Daniel stepped back, giving her space. "I'll be in my lab at MIT in the morning, but I can come by in the afternoon." Later that night, as Myra tucked Zoe into bed, her daughter fixed her with a knowing look. "You like Dr. Frost, don't you?" Myra nearly dropped the book she was holding. "What makes you say that?" "You smile differently when you talk about him. And your voice gets all soft, like when you tell me stories about Dad. Children were far too perceptive sometimes. Dr. Frost is a colleague and a friend. We work well together. Maya's mom has a boyfriend now, and she says it's okay to love someone new even if you still love the person who died." Myra sat on the edge of Zoe's bed, stunned by her daughter's directness. "Is that something you've been thinking about? Whether it would be okay if I cared for someone new?" Zoe nodded solemnly. "Sometimes I worry that Dad would be sad if you liked someone else. But then I remembered how he always said love isn't like pie." "Love isn't like pie?" "Aha. He said love doesn't get smaller when you share it with more people. It gets bigger." Zoe hugged Lily Pad tighter. "So maybe it would be okay if you liked Dr. Frost, because your heart would just get bigger, not forget about Dad." Tears pricked Myra's eyes as she pulled her daughter into a hug. "When did you get so wise, Bug?" "I've always been wise," Zoe declared with the perfect confidence of childhood. "You just weren't listening hard enough." The next morning brought a surprise visitor to Neurotech's new offices. Gregory Walsh, the recently appointed CEO of Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals, was waiting in the reception area when Myra arrived. "Mr. Walsh," she said cautiously, extending her hand. "This is unexpected. Ms. Kapoor." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. "I apologize for not making an appointment, but I thought an informal visit might be less intimidating than an official meeting request. I'm not easily intimidated, Mr. Walsh. No, I don't imagine you are. His smile seemed genuine. And please, call me Greg. May we speak privately? In her office, Walsh declined coffee but accepted a seat, studying the space with interest. You've done remarkable work here, rebuilding after everything that happened. I appreciate the acknowledgement, but I doubt you came to compliment our resilience. Direct. I like that. Walsh leaned forward slightly. I'll be equally direct. The situation between Neurotech and Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals has been, regrettable. That's one word for it. Richard Radcliffe's personal vendetta against you was unprofessional, unethical, and ultimately damaging to both companies. I want you to know that under my leadership, Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals will operate differently. Mira studied him, looking for signs of insincerity but finding none. What exactly are you proposing? A truce, to start. Followed potentially by collaboration. Your neural interface technology has applications that align with several of our research initiatives, particularly in pain management. The same technology your predecessor tried to steal? Walsh didn't flinch at her bluntness. Yes. Which is why I understand your skepticism. But I believe both our companies ultimately share the same goal, improving patients' lives. Through very different approaches. Your company prioritizes profit margins over patient access. That has been our reputation, yes. It's one of many things I hope to change. He handed her a folder. This is a proposal for a limited collaboration on pain management applications. No acquisition attempt, no hostile takeover. Just two companies pooling resources to bring a beneficial technology to market faster. Mira accepted the folder but didn't open it. Why should I trust anything connected to the Radcliffe name? You shouldn't, necessarily. Trust needs to be earned. Walsh stood to leave. Read the proposal. Discuss it with your team. Have your lawyers dissect it. And if you're interested, let's talk again. If not, I give you my word that Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals will respect your decision and maintain a professional distance. After he left, Mira opened the folder and began reading. The proposal was surprisingly reasonable, outlining a collaboration where Neurotech would retain full ownership of its technology while gaining access to Radcliffe's extensive clinical trial infrastructure and patient networks. When Liam arrived for their scheduled meeting, she handed him the proposal. What do you make of this? He read it quickly, his expression growing increasingly skeptical. It seems too good to be true. That was my thought as well. What's Walsh's angle? The Radcliffes still own a controlling interest in the company. They wouldn't approve a genuine collaboration with you. Unless they have something else planned. Mira frowned, tapping her fingers on the desk. Check Walsh's background thoroughly. And have the proposal analyzed by someone who specializes in corporate espionage. Something doesn't feel right. That afternoon, when Daniel arrived, Mira showed him the proposal as well. His reaction was more measured than Liam's. Scientifically, a collaboration makes sense, he said after reading it. Radcliffe has the largest pain management patient database in the country. Access to that would accelerate your research significantly. But given the history, I'd be extremely cautious. Corporate partnerships often lead to control issues, especially when there's a significant power imbalance. Exactly. Mira took the proposal back, sliding it into a drawer. Let's focus on what we know works. The clinical trials. The trials were progressing better than Mira had dared hope. 7 patients with treatment-resistant epilepsy had been using the neural interface for nearly a month, and 5 showed significant reduction in seizure activity. One patient, a 12-year-old girl who had previously experienced up to 10 seizures daily, had gone an entire week without a single episode. The data is compelling, Diane reported during their weekly team meeting. Especially the real-time adaptation. The device is learning each patient's unique neural patterns and becoming more effective with continued use. What about side effects? Mira asked, always mindful of safety. Minimal. Mild skin irritation at the contact point in 2 patients, easily addressed with a slight modification to the adhesive. 1 report of headaches that resolved within the first week. And the pain management cohort? Early days still, but promising. 8 of the 12 patients report significant pain reduction, and we're seeing corresponding decreases in inflammatory markers. As the meeting concluded, Rachel pulled Mira aside with a concerned expression. We've had 3 unusual requests for trial participation in the past 2 days. All from patients with connections to Radcliffe subsidiaries. You think they're trying to infiltrate our trial? It seems likely. The timing is suspicious, coming right after Walsh's visit. Decline the requests, and review all current participants for any Radcliffe connections we might have missed. The incident confirmed Myra's suspicion that Walsh's friendly overture masked something else. But what exactly were the Radcliffes planning? She found out 3 weeks later, when Liam called with alarming news. Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals just filed for patent infringement against Neurotech. What? How can they claim infringement when the court already established our ownership? They're not contesting ownership of the original technology. They're claiming your recent modifications to the pain management algorithm infringe on a patent they filed 6 months ago. That's impossible. We developed those modifications independently. They're saying the core concept was outlined in research James conducted while still at Radcliffe. Research that wasn't included in the previous case. This is absurd, Mira fumed, pacing her office. They're trying to tie us up in litigation again, drain our resources. It's worse than that, Liam said grimly. They've also filed for a preliminary injunction to halt your clinical trials pending resolution of the patent dispute. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If the trials stop, even temporarily, you lose momentum, data continuity, possibly participants. And the FDA approval timeline gets pushed back significantly. They can't do this. Those patients are seeing real benefits. Some of them have no other treatment options. I'll fight it, Mira. But you need to prepare for the possibility of a temporary shutdown. After hanging up, Mira stared at the wall of photos she'd installed in her new office. Images of the Neurotech team, of trial participants whose lives had improved, of Zoe at various ages. And in the center, James on their wedding day, his eyes bright with the future they'd planned together. They're still trying to erase us, she whispered to his image. Still trying to take what we built. The next morning, she called an emergency team meeting to inform everyone of the situation. The reactions ranged from disbelief to fury. How can they do this? Martin demanded. We have documentation of our independent development process. Documentation can be challenged, Mira replied, echoing Liam's words from months ago. And the Radcliffes excel at creating doubt. What about our trial participants? Diane asked, her concern evident. Some of them have shown remarkable improvement. Stopping treatment now could be devastating. I know. Mira had been grappling with this ethical dilemma all night. Liam is filing motions to allow continued treatment for current participants while the patent issue is resolved, but we need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. After the meeting, Daniel found her in her office, staring out the window at the rainy cityscape. I heard about the injunction. I'm so sorry, Mira. It was naive to think they'd accept defeat. She turned to face him, anger and determination mingling in her expression. But I'm not giving up. Not when we're so close to helping people who've had no hope for years. What can I do? Your academic position gives you some protection from their influence. Could you review our development records? Provide an independent verification of our process? Of course. But, he hesitated, there might be another option worth considering. What do you mean? I have contacts at the NIH. If we can get federal research funding, it would provide a layer of protection that even the Radcliffes would struggle to penetrate. Hope flickered briefly. How quickly could that happen? Under normal circumstances, the process takes months. But given the promising trial data and the urgent patient need, we might be able to fast-track it. Let's do it. And in the meantime, I need to warn our trial participants about what's happening. The most difficult conversation was with Isabella Vega, Judge Vega's 17-year-old daughter, who had joined the trial 2 weeks after the court ruling. Her severe epilepsy had shown moderate improvement with the neural interface, with seizure frequency reduced by 40%. I understand the legal constraints, Elena Vega said when Mira called to explain the situation. Her judicial demeanor couldn't quite mask the concern in her voice. But Isabella has made more progress with your device than with any treatment in the past 5 years. I'm fighting the injunction with everything I have, Mira promised. And we're exploring alternative pathways to continue treatment even if the commercial trials are suspended. The Radcliffes don't care who gets hurt in their vendetta against you, do they? No, they don't. Myra's voice was steady despite her anger. But I care. And I won't abandon patients who are benefiting from our technology, no matter what legal obstacles they throw in our path. That evening, as Mira explained the situation to Zoe in simplified terms, her daughter's response surprised her. You need to talk to Grandpa and Grandma Radcliffe directly, Zoe declared. Tell them they're hurting sick people. It's not that simple, Bug. They don't want to listen to me. Then make them listen. Zoe's expression was determined, so like James when he'd set his mind on something. Dad always said the hardest problems need the bravest solutions. The comment sparked something in Myra's mind. A memory of James confronting his father years ago, when Richard had tried to shelve a promising treatment because the profit margins weren't high enough. James had bypassed the corporate structure entirely, presenting the research directly to the board of directors with patients who would benefit in attendance. Zoe, you're brilliant, Mira said, hugging her daughter tightly. Sometimes we need to look at problems differently. Does that mean you'll talk to them? Not exactly. But I think I know how to make them listen. The next morning, Mira called a strategy meeting with Liam, Daniel, and her core team. We need to change tactics, she announced. Fighting this in court plays to their strengths. They have more resources, more lawyers, and more time than we do. So what's the alternative? Liam asked. Public pressure. The Radcliffes care about their reputation, their legacy. It's why they've tried to keep their attacks on us relatively quiet. Mira projected a slide onto the conference room wall. This is our new approach. The slide outlined a multi-pronged strategy. First, document the impact of their technology on current trial participants through video testimonials. Second, partner with patient advocacy groups to highlight how the legal action was harming vulnerable patients. Third, work with sympathetic media outlets to tell the full story of the Radcliffes' vendetta. This is aggressive, Diane observed. Are you sure you want to be this public? I'm sure I want to help our patients, Mira replied. And this is our best chance of doing that. Daniel looked concerned. The Radcliffes won't take this lying down. They could escalate their attacks. I'm counting on it, Mira said grimly. Because the more aggressively they respond, the more obvious their true motives become. Over the next week, Myra's team worked tirelessly to implement the strategy. Video testimonials from trial participants were powerful and heartbreaking, especially those from parents of children with severe epilepsy who had seen their children experience consecutive seizure-free days for the first time. Patient advocacy groups rallied quickly, organizing social media campaigns and peaceful demonstrations outside Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals headquarters. #PatientNotPatents began trending, with thousands sharing stories of how corporate battles over intellectual property harmed real people. The media coverage started slowly but gained momentum as the human impact became clear. A respected medical journalist wrote a detailed feature examining the original court case and subsequent patent claim, questioning the timing and motives behind the Radcliffe's actions. 7 days into the campaign, Mira received an unexpected call from Gregory Walsh. "This isn't how professional disagreements should be handled," he said, his carefully modulated voice betraying a hint of tension. "I agree completely," Mira replied calmly. "Filing a baseless patent claim to halt treatment for patients who have no other options isn't professional. It's cruel. The claim isn't baseless. There are legitimate concerns about technology overlap. Then let's address those concerns while allowing patients to continue treatment. Withdraw the request for preliminary injunction, and we can discuss the patent issue separately." Walsh was quiet for a moment. "The board is concerned about the public relations impact of your campaign. They should be more concerned about the human impact of their legal maneuvers. This approach makes negotiation more difficult, not less. I'm not interested in negotiation, Mr. Walsh. I'm interested in protecting my patients and my company from further harassment by the Radcliffes. If they want the negative publicity to stop, they know what to do." After hanging up, Mira felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern. She'd pushed hard, and now the Radcliffes would either retreat or escalate dramatically. Either way, the next move was theirs. She didn't have to wait long for their response. The following morning, Liam called with alarming news. "They've expanded the lawsuit to include personal claims against you. They're alleging fraud, misrepresentation to investors, and misuse of company funds. That's absurd." Myra's hand tightened around her phone. "Our financial records are impeccable. They're also claiming you've been experimenting on patients without proper oversight, and that you've concealed negative side effects from the FDA." Ice filled her veins. "They're trying to destroy not just Neurotech, but my personal reputation and career." "Yes. And they've requested an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. Judge Reynolds presiding. Not Vega. Different court, different jurisdiction for these expanded claims. What do we know about Reynolds? Conservative, by the book, no particular connection to the Radcliffes that I can find, but generally favorable to corporate interests." Mira closed her eyes briefly. "All right. Prepare the strongest defense possible for tomorrow. And Liam? I need you to quietly move some of our research data off-site, just in case. You think they might try to seize our records? I think they're capable of anything at this point." That night, after getting Zoe settled with Sarah for what might be an extended stay, Mira returned to her apartment to prepare for the hearing. She was reviewing financial documents when her doorbell rang. Opening it cautiously, she found Daniel standing there, concern etched on his face. "I heard about the expanded lawsuit. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She stepped back to let him in. "Just trying to anticipate their next move." "You look exhausted." "I am." Mira rubbed her temples. "But I can't stop now. They're coming after everything, Daniel. My company, my reputation, possibly even my medical license if their allegations about patient experimentation gain traction. You need to rest. You can't fight effectively if you're running on fumes." "I'll rest when my patients are safe." She gestured to the papers spread across her dining table. "I need to be prepared for every possible angle of attack tomorrow." Daniel moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Then let me help. Two minds are better than one, especially when one of them is about to collapse from exhaustion." Despite everything, Mira smiled. "You're persistent. It's one of my better qualities." He picked up a document, scanning it quickly. "Now, tell me what we're looking for." They worked side by side for hours, combing through financial records, trial protocols, patient consent forms, and communication with regulatory bodies. Everything was in order, meticulously documented and ethically conducted, but the Radcliffes didn't need actual evidence of wrongdoing to cause damage. The accusations alone could create enough doubt to harm Neurotech's reputation. "This is like fighting shadows," Mira said in frustration, pushing away another stack of papers. We're preparing defenses against vague allegations that can shift as soon as we address them. That's their strategy, Daniel replied. Keep you off balance, always responding rather than advancing. It's working. She sank back in her chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was facing. Maybe I should just sell them the pain management patent applications and keep the neurological treatment rights. Give them something so they'll leave us alone. Is that what James would have done? The question caught her off guard. No. He would have fought for every patient, every application of the technology. And what about Mira Kapoor? What would she do if the Radcliffes weren't in the picture at all? She would develop this technology to its full potential and make it available to everyone who needs it, regardless of their ability to pay. Daniel nodded. Then that's your answer. You can't compromise with people who don't share your fundamental values. Mira looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the unwavering support in his eyes. Why are you doing this? Helping me fight a battle that isn't yours? Because I believe in what you're doing. Because your vision for this technology aligns with everything I've worked toward in my career. He hesitated, then added softly, and because I care about you, Mira. More than I probably should, given the circumstances. The admission hung in the air between them, unexpected but not unwelcome. Before she could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, frowning. It's my department chair. I should take this. As he stepped away to answer, Mira found herself watching him, this man who had entered her life at exactly the moment when she needed an ally most. Was it coincidence? Or something more deliberate? A sudden suspicion flared. What if Daniel's interest in her work, in her, wasn't genuine? What if the Radcliffes had placed him in her path deliberately, another weapon in their arsenal against her? The thought was painful, but she couldn't dismiss it. The Radcliffes were strategic, willing to play a long game. And Daniel had appeared in her courtroom at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right expertise to gain her trust. When he returned from his call, he must have seen something in her expression. What's wrong? Nothing. She began gathering papers, avoiding his gaze. It's late. We should both get some rest before tomorrow. Mira. He gently caught her wrist. Something's changed. Tell me. She pulled away, creating distance between them. How did you know to be in that courtroom? The day of the ruling? Confusion crossed his face. What do you mean? Judge Vega specifically pointed you out to me. Said you'd been following my work. Why were you there that day? Understanding dawned in his eyes. You think I'm working with the Radcliffes? Are you? The question came out harsher than she intended. No. His voice was steady. I was in that courtroom because I've been following your research for years, since before James died. I attended your presentation at the Neuroscience Innovation Conference in 2018. I was there when you published your first paper on non-invasive neural modulation. That doesn't explain why you were in court that day. I knew about the bankruptcy case from colleagues. The potential loss of your technology would have been a significant setback for the entire field. He sighed. I attended because I wanted to see if there was any way I could help, either by testifying about the originality of your approach or by offering academic collaboration if things went badly. The explanation sounded plausible, but doubt had taken root. And you just happened to have insights that significantly improved our algorithm? My insights built on your foundation, Mira. I've been researching neural oscillation patterns for 15 years. Our collaboration works because we bring different perspectives to the same problem. He took a step toward her, then stopped when she tensed. I understand your suspicion. The Radcliffes have given you every reason to distrust sudden allies. But I'm not their tool, Mira. I've built my career on research that pharmaceutical companies have repeatedly deemed commercially non-viable because it doesn't generate enough profit. Something in his tone, the hint of old battles fought and lost, rang true. But Mira had been betrayed too many times to trust easily. "I want to believe you," she said finally. "But right now, I can't afford to be wrong about anyone's motives." "I respect that." Daniel gathered his things. "For what it's worth, I've never worked with or for the Radcliffes in any capacity. And my interest in your work, and in you, is entirely genuine." He moved toward the door. "Good luck tomorrow." "I'll be there if you want me to be, or I'll stay away if that makes things easier for you." After he left, Mira sat alone in her apartment, the silence pressing in around her. Had she just pushed away someone who genuinely cared for her work, for her? Or had she narrowly avoided another Radcliffe trap? Either way, she was once again facing the battle alone. Just as she had been for the past 3 years. The morning brought rain again, heavy drops battering against her bedroom window as Mira dressed for court. She chose a charcoal gray suit, simple but authoritative, and pulled her hair back in a sleek bun. Every detail of her appearance needed to convey competence and integrity to counter the Radcliffe's accusations. Liam was waiting for her outside the courthouse, along with 2 additional attorneys he'd brought in to strengthen their defense team. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The courtroom was nearly full, with legal teams from both sides, reporters, and spectators filling the benches. Mira scanned the crowd briefly, not seeing Daniel among them. Whether he had stayed away out of respect for her wishes or because her suspicions had been correct, she couldn't be sure. Richard and Elaine Radcliffe sat at the plaintiff's table, both impeccably dressed as always. Richard's silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and Elaine's pearls caught the light when she turned to whisper something to their lead attorney. Gregory Walsh was notably absent, suggesting that this escalated attack might not have his full support. Another potential crack in the Radcliffe armor, Mira thought. All rise for the Honorable Judge Malcolm Reynolds. The judge who entered was an older man with a stern expression and wire-rimmed glasses. He surveyed the courtroom with a critical eye before taking his seat. "Be seated. I've reviewed the filings in this case, and I must say I find the timing and nature of these allegations troubling." He looked directly at the Radcliffe's attorney. "Mr. Donovan, your clients have made serious accusations of fraud and patient endangerment. What evidence supports these claims?" Donovan rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we have documentation suggesting Neurotech has misrepresented the results of its clinical trials to investors, specifically regarding the efficacy rates in epilepsy patients." "And this documentation?" "Internal communications between Neurotech researchers expressing concern about early results not matching projections." Mira leaned toward Liam. "That's got to be from the first 2 weeks of trials, before the algorithm adjustments," she whispered. "We documented the improvement after the modifications." Liam nodded, making notes. "They're cherry-picking information. We can counter with the complete timeline." Judge Reynolds turned to their table. "Mr. Chen, your response." Liam stood. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs are presenting incomplete information. The communications they reference were early in the trial process, and as is standard in medical research, adjustments were made as data became available. The complete trial records show clear, documented improvement in patient outcomes following these adjustments. And the allegations of concealing negative side effects from regulatory bodies? Completely false, Your Honor. All adverse events, however minor, were reported to the FDA in accordance with protocol. We have the submission receipts and acknowledgments from the FDA to verify this." The morning proceeded with detailed arguments about financial records, regulatory compliance, and research ethics. At each point, Liam and his team presented clear evidence contradicting the Radcliffe's accusations. By the lunch recess, Mira felt cautiously optimistic. Judge Reynolds seemed skeptical of the plaintiff's claims and receptive to their defense. During the break, Liam pulled her aside. "We're in better shape than I expected. Reynolds isn't buying their narrative, and their evidence is circumstantial at best. So why do they look so confident?" Mira nodded toward Richard Radcliffe, who was speaking calmly with Donovan, a slight smile on his face. Because they still have their ace card to play. Liam lowered his voice. I've heard rumors they have a witness for the afternoon session. Someone from inside Neurotech. Myra's blood ran cold. Who? I don't know. But be prepared for anything. When court reconvened, Donovan called his final witness, Dr. Daniel Frost. Mira felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. She watched in stunned silence as Daniel was sworn in, his face solemn as he took the stand. The betrayal she'd feared last night now seemed devastatingly real. Dr. Frost, Donovan began, please state your relationship to Neurotech and to the defendant, Dr. Mira Kapoor. Daniel looked directly at Mira as he answered. I am a consultant for Neurotech, specifically focused on the neural oscillation algorithm used in their interface device. My relationship with Dr. Kapoor is professional, though we have also developed a personal friendship. And when did this consulting relationship begin? Formally, about 3 months ago, following the initial court ruling between Neurotech and Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. Prior to this formal relationship, did you have any connection to either company? I had followed Dr. Kapoor's research for several years. I had no connection to Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. Donovan approached the witness stand. Dr. Frost, in your expert opinion, is it possible that the neural interface technology developed by Neurotech incorporates concepts that originated in Dr. James Radcliffe's work while he was employed by Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals? Mira held her breath, waiting for the betrayal to be complete. This was why they had brought Daniel into her life, to provide expert testimony supporting their claims. No, it is not possible, Daniel stated firmly. Donovan looked startled. Excuse me. It is not possible, Daniel repeated. I have reviewed the complete development history of Neurotech's neural interface, including Dr. James Radcliffe's notebooks from both before and after his departure from Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. The approach taken by Neurotech represents a fundamental paradigm shift from the research direction pursued at Radcliffe. Donovan recovered quickly. Yet you helped modify their algorithm for pain management applications, did you not? Applications that align with a patent filed by Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. I contributed to refinements of an already established algorithm. And regarding the patent you reference, I have reviewed it as well. The Radcliffe approach relies on continuous suppression of neural activity in pain centers, while Neurotech's approach uses adaptive modulation that responds to changing neural states. They are fundamentally different methodologies. Mira watched in amazement as Daniel systematically dismantled the Radcliffe's technical claims, his expertise and clarity leaving no room for misinterpretation. He was not their witness at all, but hers. Dar. Frost, Donovan tried again, isn't it true that you expressed concerns about patient safety in Neurotech's trials? I expressed the concerns that any responsible scientist would when developing new medical technology, that we proceed carefully, document thoroughly, and prioritize patient safety above all else. At no point did I observe any ethical breaches or safety concerns in Neurotech's trials. But you suggested modifications to their protocols. I suggested refinements to improve efficacy, not to address safety deficiencies. Daniel's voice remained steady. Every medical innovation evolves through such refinements. That's how science progresses. By the time Donovan finished his questioning, his frustration was evident. Liam's cross-examination was brief but effective, allowing Daniel to elaborate on the unique aspects of Neurotech's approach and the rigorous ethical standards Mira had established for the clinical trials. As Daniel stepped down from the witness stand, his eyes met Myra's. The message in them was clear, I told you the truth. I am not their tool. The shame of her suspicion washed over her, tempered by relief and something deeper, a recognition that trust wasn't just about evidence but also about faith in another person's character. After several more hours of argument, Judge Reynolds called the attorneys to the bench for a private conference. When they returned to their tables, Liam looked relieved. The judge is prepared to rule, he whispered. And he's not happy with the Radcliffes. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses before addressing the courtroom. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented today, I find the plaintiff's allegations to be without merit. The claims of fraud, misrepresentation, and patient endangerment are dismissed with prejudice. Relief flooded through Mira, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I find the timing and nature of these accusations, following so closely on the heels of a definitive ruling in a related case, to suggest potential abuse of the legal system. I am denying the request for a preliminary injunction against Neuroteca's clinical trials, and I am referring this matter to the Bar Association for review of potential ethics violations. He turned a stern gaze toward the Radcliffes. This court takes a dim view of using litigation as a weapon to harass competitors or settle personal vendettas. Should similar baseless claims be brought in the future, I will consider sanctions against both the plaintiffs and their legal counsel. With a final bang of his gavel, court was adjourned. The Radcliffes exited quickly, avoiding reporters and refusing to comment on the ruling. Mira stood in the empty courtroom, the magnitude of their victory slowly sinking in. They had won again, and this time, the judge's warning might actually deter further attacks. "Congratulations," Daniel said quietly, approaching from where he had been waiting near the back of the courtroom. "You deserved this victory." "Daniel." Emotions choked her voice. "I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have doubted you." "Yes, you should have." His smile was gentle. "The Radcliffes gave you every reason to question everyone's motives. I'm just glad I had the opportunity to prove mine." "By testifying against them?" "They called you as their witness. They thought I would support their technical claims. When I reviewed their case materials, I realized they had fundamentally misinterpreted the science, whether deliberately or out of ignorance." He shrugged. "I couldn't lie under oath, no matter whose witness I was. Thank you. For telling the truth. For being there when it mattered. Always." The word held a promise that made her heart beat faster. As they left the courthouse together, reporters called out questions, cameras flashed, and rain continued to fall. But Mira felt lighter than she had in years. The Radcliffes might not be finished with her yet, but she was no longer fighting alone. The weeks following their second court victory brought a cautious sense of normalcy to Neurotech. Clinical trials resumed with renewed momentum, investor confidence surged, and the neural interface device continued to improve with each iteration. For the first time in years, Mira allowed herself to focus on the work itself rather than the fight to protect it. "The latest data from the pediatric epilepsy cohort is remarkable," Diane announced during their Friday research meeting. 83% reduction in seizure frequency across all participants, with 4 children completely seizure-free for more than 30 days. Mira studied the charts on the screen, her scientist's skepticism warring with hope. "Any signs of tolerance developing? Loss of efficacy over time?" "None so far. If anything, the effectiveness is increasing as the algorithm learns each patient's unique neural patterns." Martin chimed in from his station. "The pain management results are nearly as impressive. Average pain reduction of 76%, with significant improvement in sleep quality and daily function scores." "An FDA review?" Mira asked. "They've granted us accelerated assessment status based on the preliminary data," Rachel reported. "If this trajectory continues, we could have approval for the epilepsy application within 8 months, pain management following 6 months after that." 8 months. After years of struggle, the finish line was finally in sight. Mira felt a surge of emotion so intense she had to take a moment to compose herself. "James would be amazed by what we've accomplished," she said quietly. Her team exchanged glances, unused to hearing her speak so openly about her late husband. In the early days of Neurotech, James's name and vision had been ever present. But as the Radcliffes' attacks intensified, Mira had gradually stopped invoking his memory, as if protecting it from the battle. "He'd be proud," Diane said, placing a hand on Myra's shoulder. Of the technology, yes, but mostly of you. How you fought for it. How you've never compromised on what matters. Later that afternoon, Mira sat in her office reviewing patient testimonials for an upcoming FDA presentation. The stories were powerful: a college student with severe epilepsy who had been able to return to classes, a chronic pain patient who had reduced her opioid medication by 80%, a child with intractable seizures who had spoken his first complete sentence after weeks of neural stabilization. A knock at her door interrupted her reading. Daniel stood in the doorway, a bouquet of sunflowers in one hand and a folder in the other. "I come bearing gifts," he said with a smile. "The flowers are just because." The folder contains the results of our MIT collaboration on memory enhancement applications. Mira accepted both, setting the bright flowers on her desk. "They're beautiful. Thank you. You look like you could use some sunshine." He nodded toward the testimonials on her screen. "Heavy reading?" "The opposite, actually. These are stories from our trial participants. It's overwhelming to see the impact we're having. May I?" At her nod, he moved behind her desk to read over her shoulder. His presence was comforting rather than intrusive, a change that had developed gradually since the second court hearing. The trust that had been fractured and then restored was now stronger, built on actions rather than assumptions. "For the first time in 15 years, I've gone an entire month without a single seizure," he read aloud from one testimonial. "I've started driving again. I've applied to graduate school. I'm planning a future I never thought I'd have." "That's Isabella Vega," Mira explained. "Judge Vega's daughter." "Remarkable." Daniel's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "This is why we do what we do. Not for patents or profits, but for moments like these. It almost doesn't feel real." Mira leaned back in her chair, allowing herself to acknowledge the enormity of what they'd accomplished. After fighting so hard just to survive, actually succeeding seems terrifying. "Yes." She looked up at him, grateful that he understood. "What if something goes wrong? What if the long-term data doesn't support these early results? What if the Radcliffes find another way to attack us? Those are all legitimate concerns." Daniel pulled up a chair beside her. "But you can't let fear of what might happen prevent you from celebrating what has happened. These lives are already changed for the better because of your work." "Our work," she corrected. "Your contributions to the algorithm have been essential. I refined what was already brilliant." He smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her pulse quicken slightly. "Speaking of celebrations, I was wondering if you might join me for dinner tomorrow night. To mark the 3-month anniversary of continuous trials." "I'd like that." Mira found herself smiling back. "But I promised Zoe I'd take her to the planetarium tomorrow. They have a special exhibit on women in astronomy that she's been talking about for weeks." "The planetarium sounds perfect, actually. I've been meaning to see that exhibit myself. Perhaps we could make it a group outing. Unless," he hesitated, "you'd prefer it to be just you and Zoe." The offer touched her. Many men would have suggested rescheduling or finding a sitter, not understanding that after years of being Zoe's only parent, Mira was careful about balancing her personal life with her daughter's needs. "Zoe would love that. She's been asking when Daniel will visit again. Apparently, your explanation of neural pathways using spaghetti and meatballs made quite an impression. Visual aids are crucial in science education," he said solemnly, though his eyes twinkled with humor. "I'll bring my extensive pasta knowledge to the planetarium, then." After he left, Mira found herself staring at the sunflowers, bright and resilient against the backdrop of her office. Like everything about Daniel, they were thoughtful without being presumptuous, supportive without being overwhelming. Their relationship had evolved slowly, built on professional respect that gradually extended to personal connection. They had never explicitly defined what was happening between them, but dinner invitations had become more frequent, conversations had expanded beyond work, and Mira had begun to recognize the flutter in her chest when he entered a room. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. After James died, she had poured all her emotional energy into Zoe and Neurotech, convinced there was no space in her life for anything else. But Daniel had slipped past her defenses, not by demanding attention but by offering support when she needed it most. That evening, she told Zoe about the planetarium plans over dinner. "Dr. Daniel is coming too." Zoe's face lit up. "Can we show him the solar system model I made for science class? It's at school, Bug. But I'm sure he'd love to see pictures. I'll bring my tablet so I can show him." Zoe twirled spaghetti around her fork thoughtfully. "Mom. Is Dr. Daniel your boyfriend?" Mira nearly choked on her water. "What? No. He's a colleague. A friend. Maya says when adults get that look in their eyes, they're boyfriend and girlfriend." "What look?" "The mushy one. Like how you look when you talk about him, and how he looked at you when he came over to help with my science project. Children were frighteningly perceptive sometimes. It's complicated, Zoe. Dr. Daniel and I work together, and yes, we enjoy spending time together outside of work too. But adult relationships take time to develop." "Because of Dad?" Zoe asked quietly. "Partly." Mira reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Dad will always be important to both of us. But also because I've been focused on you and on our company for a long time. But you might be boyfriend and girlfriend someday." The question was asked with such innocent hope that Mira couldn't help smiling. "Maybe. Would that be okay with you?" "I think so. He makes really good explanations about science stuff. And he makes you laugh. You didn't laugh much before he started coming around." The observation, so simple yet profound, caught Mira off guard. Had she been so focused on survival that she'd forgotten joy? Had Daniel brought that back into their lives without her even realizing it? "Well, for now, he's a good friend who's joining us at the planetarium. And speaking of science, don't you have a biology worksheet to finish?" The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Neurotech. Gregory Walsh, CEO of Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals, arrived unannounced just as Mira was preparing to leave for a meeting with their FDA liaison. "Mr. Walsh," she greeted him cautiously. "I wasn't aware we had an appointment." "We don't." He looked uncomfortable, a stark contrast to his usual polished demeanor. "I need to speak with you privately. It's urgent." In her office, Walsh declined coffee and came straight to the point. "The Radcliffes are planning to sell their controlling interest in Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals." "To whom?" Mira asked, immediately alert to potential threats. "Northbrook Medical. It's a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring and consolidating pharmaceutical companies." The name sent a chill through her. Northbrook was notorious for buying promising medical technologies, maximizing their profitability through aggressive pricing, and restricting access to maintain market control. "Why are you telling me this?" Walsh ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that seemed out of character for the usually composed executive. "Because Northbrook has expressed specific interest in acquiring the neural interface technology. They see it as the cornerstone of a new pain management portfolio. They can't acquire what isn't for sale." Myra's voice was firm. "Neurotech isn't interested in acquisition offers." "I know that." Walsh leaned forward. "But the Radcliffes have told Northbrook they have a strategy for forcing a sale or licensing agreement. I don't know the details, but given their past tactics, it would be something underhanded and potentially devastating." Mira finished his thought. "Why are you warning me? You work for the Radcliffes. Not for much longer if this sale goes through. Northbrook always replaces management with their own people." He hesitated. "But that's not why I'm here. The truth is, I believe in what you're doing, Ms. Kapoor. Your approach to patient-centered innovation is what attracted me to Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals in the first place, before I understood the family dynamics at play. Mira studied him, searching for signs of deception but finding only what appeared to be genuine concern. Do you know when this sale might happen? The board votes next week. It's been presented as a highly confidential strategic realignment, with most members unaware of Northbrook's specific interest in your technology. After Walsh left, Mira immediately called Liam and Daniel, asking them to meet her as soon as possible. This potential threat was different from the Radcliffe's previous attacks, more insidious and potentially more damaging to their long-term mission. Northbrook is the worst possible buyer, Liam confirmed when they gathered in Myra's office an hour later. They've been investigated twice for price gouging on essential medications, and their patient access programs are essentially non-existent. They're also notorious for shelving competing technologies to protect their primary revenue streams, Daniel added. If they can't acquire newer tech directly, they might try to block our market access through regulatory manipulation or exclusivity agreements with healthcare systems. So how do we stop them? Mira asked. We've withstood direct attacks from the Radcliffes, but fighting a multinational private equity firm is different territory entirely. Liam frowned, tapping his pen against his legal pad. The most direct approach would be to prevent the sale itself. If the Radcliffes don't sell to Northbrook, the immediate threat is neutralized. And how exactly do we prevent billionaires from selling their company to the highest bidder? Myra's frustration was evident. We don't have the resources to outbid Northbrook. No, but we might have leverage the Radcliffes care about. Daniel's expression was thoughtful. Their legacy. Explain. The Radcliffe name is synonymous with pharmaceutical innovation. Richard Radcliffe's father and grandfather built that reputation over generations. If the sale to Northbrook were framed publicly as abandoning that legacy, as selling out to profit hunters who care nothing for patient outcomes, they might reconsider, Mira finished, understanding his direction. But that would require a public campaign that exposes Northbrook's history and intentions. We'd be making very powerful enemies. We've already made powerful enemies, Liam pointed out. At least these ones don't have a personal vendetta against you. Not yet, anyway. Mira stood and began pacing, her mind racing through scenarios. We need more information before we can formulate a strategy. Specifically, we need to know exactly how the Radcliffes plan to force our compliance. I might have a source who can help with that, Liam said. One of my former colleagues works for a law firm that sometimes represents Northbrook. I'll see what I can find out discreetly. And I'll reach out to some contacts in the medical research community, Daniel offered. Start gathering documentation on Northbrook's impact on innovation and patient access in other acquisitions. As they left to pursue their respective tasks, Mira found herself once again preparing for battle. But this time, the fight wasn't just about Neuroteca's survival. It was about the soul of medical innovation itself, the fundamental question of whether life-saving technologies should be developed for profit or for patients. That evening, despite the looming threat, Mira kept her promise to take Zoe to the planetarium. Daniel met them at the entrance, his smile genuine despite the concern she knew he shared about Northbrook. Ready to explore the cosmos, he asked Zoe, who was practically bouncing with excitement. I brought my tablet to show you my solar system model. Zoe held up the device proudly. And Mom said we can get ice cream after if it's not too late. Ice cream is essential for proper astronomical observation, Daniel agreed solemnly. It's scientifically proven. Watching them interact, Mira felt a bittersweet pang. James would have loved this exhibit, would have explained the constellations to Zoe with the same enthusiasm Daniel showed. But James was gone, and somehow, life had continued. New connections had formed where she thought only emptiness could exist. The evening was a welcome respite from worry. Zoe marveled at the recreations of the night sky, asked thoughtful questions about the women scientists featured in the exhibit, and beamed with pride when Daniel pronounced her solar system model extraordinarily accurate, especially the relative orbital velocities. Later, as they sat at a nearby ice cream parlor, Zoe excused herself to the restroom, leaving Mira and Daniel alone briefly. "Thank you for this," Mira said softly. "With everything happening, I almost cancelled, but Zoe needed this normal evening. And so did you." Daniel's hand covered hers on the table. "We'll deal with Northbrook. But we can't stop living while we fight. That's what James used to say. When the research hit obstacles, he'd insist we take breaks, get perspective." She smiled at the memory. "Once he dragged me to a midnight movie premiere when I wanted to keep working on a problematic simulation. He said science happens in the spaces between focused effort, when your mind has room to wander." He was right. Daniel's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "And he'd be proud of how you've carried forward not just his research, but his approach to life and work." "I hope so." Mira turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. "Sometimes I worry I've been so focused on the fight that I've lost sight of why we were fighting in the first place." "You haven't. Every decision you've made has been guided by what's best for patients, not what's easiest or most profitable. That's the essence of what you and James started together." Zoe returned, immediately noticing their clasped hands and breaking into a wide grin that she quickly tried to hide behind her ice cream cup. "The stars were really cool," she said, changing the subject with exaggerated casualness. "Especially the ones that explode and make all the elements." "Supernovas," Daniel supplied. "They're my favorite too." "Mine as well," Mira added, sharing a smile with her daughter. The moment of peace was short-lived. The following morning, Liam called with disturbing news. "I found out how Northbrook plans to acquire your technology," he said, his voice grim. "They're going to use Rachel." "Rachel?" "Our operations manager." "How?" "She's been feeding information to the Radcliffes for months. Financial projections, research timelines, staff concerns. Nothing confidential enough to be criminal, but enough to give them insight into vulnerabilities." Mira felt physically ill. Rachel had been with Neurotech almost from the beginning, had weathered salary cuts and relocation with apparent loyalty. "Are you sure?" "Unfortunately, yes. My contact showed me communications between her and Elaine Radcliffe. It appears they offered her a senior position at Northbrook's planned Neurotech division, contingent on acquisition of the interface technology." "What's their actual strategy? How do they plan to force us to sell?" "That's where it gets concerning. Rachel has apparently convinced them that your financial position is more precarious than it appears. That the $20 million from the court ruling has been depleted faster than anticipated due to expanded trials and facility upgrades." "That's not true. We've been careful with those funds precisely because we anticipated more attacks." "I know. But Northbrook believes it, which means they're planning to offer a lifeline when they think you're most vulnerable. A strategic investment with strings attached that would give them effective control of the technology while leaving you as the nominal head of Neurotech." Myra's mind raced. "When are they planning to make this move?" "According to my source, immediately after the Radcliffe sale is finalized. They want to strike while you're still dealing with that news." After hanging up, Mira sat at her desk, anger and betrayal warring with strategic calculation. Rachel's duplicity hurt, but it also presented an opportunity. If Northbrook believed Neurotech was financially vulnerable, perhaps that misconception could be used against them. She called an emergency meeting with her leadership team, excluding Rachel but including Daniel and Liam. After explaining the situation, she outlined her emerging strategy. "We need to make Northbrook believe their information is accurate," she said. "That means continuing normal operations while laying groundwork for a counter-move." "What exactly are you planning?" Diane asked, her expression troubled. "We can't actually sell to them. Everything we've built would be corrupted." "No, we can't sell. But we can appear receptive to investment while securing our technology and patience through other means. Mira pulled up a document on her tablet. I've been working on this contingency plan for months, ever since the first court victory. It's time to implement it. The plan she outlined was bold, potentially risky, but aligned perfectly with Neuroteca's core mission. They would create a separate non-profit foundation dedicated to ensuring patient access to neural interface technology, with patents and intellectual property partially transferred to this new entity under specific usage guidelines. The foundation would hold perpetual licensing rights for medical applications, particularly for underserved populations, Mira explained. Neurotech would retain development and commercial rights, but with contractual obligations to maintain accessibility. You're creating a firewall between the commercial entity and the humanitarian mission, Liam observed, impressed. Even if Northbrook acquired Neurotech, they couldn't restrict access to the technology or price it beyond reach. Exactly. And by separating these aspects legally before any acquisition attempt, we make the technology less attractive to predatory investors while protecting its core purpose. The Radcliffes will be furious when they realize what you've done, Martin warned. Yes, they will. Myra's expression was determined. But by then, it will be too late. The foundation will already exist, with its own board of directors and independent funding sources. Speaking of funding, Liam interjected, how do we address the perception that Neurotech is financially vulnerable? Northbrook will be suspicious if that suddenly changes. We don't change it. We let them believe what Rachel has told them, that we've depleted our resources and might be receptive to a strategic investment. Mira smiled slightly. The beauty of this approach is that while they're focusing on acquiring Neurotech, the foundation will quietly secure the humanitarian applications of the technology. Over the next 2 weeks, they moved with careful precision. Publicly, Neurotech continued its clinical trials and research as usual. Rachel was kept on normal duties, given access to carefully curated information that supported the narrative of financial strain. Meanwhile, Mira, Liam, and a small trusted team worked nights and weekends to establish the Neural Access Foundation, with an initial board comprising respected medical researchers, patient advocates, and ethical technology experts. Daniel proved invaluable in this effort, leveraging his academic connections to secure credibility and support for the foundation. His MIT position provided a veneer of independence that helped shield the foundation's true origins from immediate scrutiny. The paperwork is filed, Liam reported one evening as they worked late in Myra's apartment, Zoe already asleep in her room. The foundation officially exists as a legal entity, with initial funding from anonymous donors. Most of whom happen to be early Neurotech investors who believe in the mission, Daniel added with a smile. Quite a coincidence. Mira nodded, reviewing the documents. And the patent assignments? Structured exactly as we discussed. Neurotech retains primary commercial rights, but the foundation holds perpetual, irrevocable licensing authority for humanitarian applications, with explicit affordability requirements. Excellent. Now we wait for their move. Mira closed her laptop, suddenly exhausted. The strain of maintaining normal operations while secretly establishing the foundation had taken its toll. Daniel noticed immediately. You need rest, Mira. You can't keep pushing yourself like this. I'll rest when our patients are protected. But even as she said it, she knew he was right. The pace was unsustainable. Zoe said something interesting to me yesterday, Daniel mentioned, changing the subject. She asked if I knew that her dad used to say love isn't like pie. Despite her exhaustion, Mira smiled. She told me the same thing a while ago. It was something James would say to her when she worried about having enough love for everyone important in her life. That love doesn't get smaller when you share it, it gets bigger. Wise man. Daniel's voice was gentle. And a lucky one, to have had you and Zoe, even if for too short a time. Daniel, Mira began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. You don't have to say anything, he assured her. I know timing is complicated. With everything happening with Neurotech, with Zoe, with your ongoing connection to James. It's not that simple. She met his gaze directly. Yes, James will always be part of who I am, part of our family story. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for someone else. For you. If that's what you want. It is. The simple statement carried the weight of months of growing feelings, of partnership through crisis, of shared purpose and emerging trust. But only when you're ready. Not a moment before. Before she could respond, her phone rang, the screen displaying Rachel's name. It was nearly midnight, far too late for a routine call. Rachel, she answered cautiously. Is everything all right? I'm sorry, Rachel's voice was thick with tears. I'm so sorry, Mira. They made me do it. They knew about my brother's medical debts, they said they'd help if I just. Slow down. Where are you? Outside your apartment. Please, I need to talk to you. They're moving tonight. They already know about the foundation. Myra's blood ran cold. She exchanged alarmed glances with Daniel and Liam. I'll come down. Wait there. In the lobby of her apartment building, Rachel stood huddled near the entrance, her eyes red from crying, her usual composure completely shattered. I never meant for it to go this far, she said as soon as she saw Mira. It started small, just general information about the company in exchange for help with my brother's cancer treatments. But then they wanted more, and then Northbrook got involved, and... What's happening tonight? Mira interrupted, cutting through the excuses to the immediate threat. They're going to the board of the Neural Access Foundation with evidence that the entire structure is a fraudulent attempt to shield assets from creditors and tax obligations. They have fabricated emails, financial records that make it look like you're embezzling funds from Neurotech to the foundation for personal use. That's ridiculous. We have clear documentation of the legitimate purpose and structure. It doesn't matter. They have a judge ready to issue an emergency injunction freezing all foundation assets pending investigation. And once that happens, Northbrook will offer emergency funding to continue the clinical trials, with conditions that effectively give them control. Liam's legal mind immediately grasped the implications. They're weaponizing regulatory bureaucracy. Even if the allegations are eventually disproven, the delay could kill the clinical trials and force Neurotech into exactly the vulnerable position they want. When is this happening? Daniel asked. The filing is prepared for first thing tomorrow morning. Rachel couldn't meet Myra's eyes. I'm only telling you because they double-crossed me too. The promised position at Northbrook disappeared as soon as they had what they needed. And my brother. They stopped paying for his treatments last week. Mira felt a complex mix of emotions, anger at Rachel's betrayal mingling with pragmatic assessment of their options. We have until morning to counter this move. Rachel, I need everything you have. Every communication, every document they shared with you, everything you shared with them. Through the night, Mira, Liam, Daniel, and Rachel worked frantically to prepare a counter-strategy. By dawn, they had compiled comprehensive evidence of the Radcliffes and Northbrooks' coordinated plan, including Rachel's sworn testimony about how she had been coerced into cooperation. This is enough for a preemptive filing of our own, Liam said, reviewing their materials. We can request an emergency hearing this morning, before they can file their injunction request. And we go public immediately, Daniel added. Full transparency about the foundation's purpose, the threat from Northbrook, everything. Mira nodded, her mind made up. Rachel, call everyone on the Neurotech team. I want them at the office in 2 hours. We're going to get ahead of this. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. before Judge Elena Vega, a stroke of fortune that gave Mira hope. As they prepared to leave for the courthouse, Sarah arrived to stay with Zoe, who was still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the night's developments. Whatever happens, protect the patients first, Mira instructed her team before departing. If I can't stop this attack, implement Protocol Omega. Protocol Omega was their last resort contingency, a plan to release all research and technical specifications for the neural interface into open-source repositories, effectively making it impossible for anyone to monopolize the core technology. It would sacrifice commercial potential, but would ensure the innovation remained available to those who needed it most. The courthouse corridors were eerily familiar as Mira, Liam, and Daniel hurried toward courtroom 3. Outside the doors, they encountered Richard and Elaine Radcliffe with their legal team, clearly surprised to find Mira already present. "This won't work," Richard said dismissively. "Your desperate maneuvers only delay the inevitable." Mira faced him directly, her voice level despite her anger. "Why are you doing this? After all this time, after all the court rulings against you, why can't you just accept that James chose a different path than the one you planned for him?" "This isn't about James anymore," Elaine interjected coldly. "It's about business. Your technology is valuable, and Northbrook recognizes that value. No, they recognize potential profit. They don't care about the patients, about the lives this technology could change. Profit is how business works, Mira," Richard replied condescendingly. Something James never fully understood either. He understood it perfectly. He just rejected the idea that profit should come before patience. Myra's gaze was steady. "Just like you rejected your vision for his life." Before either Radcliffe could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Judge Vega's clerk announced that both parties should enter immediately. Inside, Judge Vega listened carefully as Liam presented their evidence of coordinated legal harassment and market manipulation. When the Radcliffe's attorney tried to counter with allegations about the foundation's legitimacy, Liam systematically dismantled each claim with documented proof of proper legal structure and transparent purpose. "Your Honor," Liam concluded, "what we're witnessing is a deliberate attempt to use the legal system to achieve what cannot be accomplished through legitimate business channels. The Neural Access Foundation exists specifically to ensure that life-saving medical technology remains accessible to all patients who need it, regardless of commercial considerations." Judge Vega turned to the Radcliffe's table. "Mr. Donovan, your clients have appeared before me multiple times now, each time with allegations that have ultimately proved baseless. This court is growing weary of what appears to be systematic abuse of the legal process. Your Honor, Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals has legitimate concerns about potential fraudulent asset shielding. Concerns based on information obtained through what appears to be coercion of a Neurotech employee," the judge interrupted. "Information that has already been thoroughly rebutted by documented evidence." She studied both parties for a long moment before continuing. "I am denying the request for an injunction against the Neural Access Foundation. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals, its officers, and any affiliated entities including Northbrook Medical from filing additional legal claims against Neurotech or the Foundation without prior court review for merit." Relief flooded through Mira as Judge Vega continued. "Additionally, I am referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Investigation of Potential Violations of Federal Laws regarding Corporate Espionage, Witness Tampering, and Abuse of Process." When court adjourned, the Radcliffes exited quickly, avoiding reporters who had gathered in the hallway after news of the emergency hearing spread. Mira found herself surrounded by her team, their faces reflecting triumph tinged with lingering concern. "Will this stop them?" Martin asked. "Or will they find another angle of attack?" "I don't know," Mira admitted. "But the foundation is secure, which means the patients are protected regardless of what happens next." As they left the courthouse, Daniel received a call that made him stop abruptly on the steps. "Are you certain?" he asked the caller, his expression growing increasingly alarmed. "When did this happen?" After hanging up, he turned to Mira with urgency. "The Radcliffe board just voted on the Northbrook sale. And they rejected it. Unanimously. My contact says there was a last-minute presentation from Gregory Walsh that changed everyone's mind." "What kind of presentation?" "Patient impact data. Specifically, video testimonials from neural interface trial participants, including several board members' family members who've been treated for chronic conditions using technologies developed at Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. Mira struggled to process this unexpected development. Walsh used our playbook against the Radcliffes. He reminded the board what the company is supposed to stand for. Apparently, he also presented an alternative strategic direction, focusing on collaborative research rather than acquisition. A partnership model that would maintain Radcliffe's research integrity while expanding market reach. So the Northbrook threat is neutralized, Liam concluded. At least for now. But the Radcliffes still control the company, Mira pointed out. They can regroup, try again. Actually, Daniel checked his phone, which had just chimed with a news alert. It appears Richard Radcliffe has resigned as chairman of the board, effective immediately. Elaine as well. What? Let me see. Mira read the breaking news headline with disbelief. Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals announces leadership transition, founders step down, board appoints Gregory Walsh as executive chairman. The implications were enormous. Without the Radcliffes at the helm, the personal vendetta against Mira and Neurotech might finally end. The company James had walked away from might return to the values its founders had originally envisioned. It's over, Liam said quietly. After all this time, it's really over. But Mira knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Not yet. We need to hear directly from Walsh about his intentions. That opportunity came sooner than expected. As they returned to Neurotech's offices, they found Gregory Walsh waiting in the reception area, alone and without the usual corporate entourage. Congratulations on your new position, Mira said cautiously as they entered her office. The news is moving quickly. Thank you. Walsh seemed different somehow, more relaxed despite the obvious stress of recent events. I wanted to speak with you personally before any official announcements are made about Radcliffe's future direction. I appreciate that. What can I expect from Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals under your leadership? Partnership, not predation. Walsh handed her a folder. This is a preliminary proposal for a collaborative research initiative focused on expanding neural interface applications. No acquisition attempt, no controlling interest, just scientists working together toward common goals. Mira accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. Why should I trust this offer when previous ones concealed ulterior motives? A fair question. Walsh met her gaze directly. The Radcliffes are gone, Ms. Kapoor. Their resignation was the condition the board set for rejecting the Northbrook sale. They've agreed to sell their shares back to the company over the next 5 years, effectively removing their influence entirely. And what happens when another profit-driven entity makes an offer the board can't refuse? That's why I'm here. The board has voted to establish a medical ethics committee with binding authority over all research partnerships and acquisition decisions. I'd like you to consider serving on that committee. The proposal was unexpected, almost stunning in its implications. You want me, the person Richard Radcliffe has been trying to destroy for years, to help shape the future of his company? I want the person who has consistently prioritized patients over profits to help ensure Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals does the same. Walsh smiled slightly. James always said you were the conscience of your partnership. Perhaps you could serve a similar role for the company he left behind. The mention of James, spoken with genuine respect rather than as a manipulative tool, caught Mira off guard. I'll need to review your proposal carefully, discuss it with my team. Of course. Take all the time you need. Walsh stood to leave. One more thing. The board has authorized me to establish a research grant in James's name, focused on developing technologies for underserved patient populations. I'd be honored if you would help define its parameters. After he left, Mira sat in silence, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The battle she had been fighting for 3 years appeared to be over, not with the crushing victory or devastating defeat she had imagined, but with an unexpected opportunity for reconciliation and collaboration. What are you thinking? Daniel asked gently. I'm thinking that James would find this ironic. A small smile tugged at her lips. His parents fought so hard to erase his legacy, only to have it ultimately transform the very company they were trying to protect from his influence. Will you consider Walsh's proposal? Yes. Cautiously, with full legal review and plenty of safeguards. But yes. She looked up at Daniel and Liam. The goal was never to win a war against the Radcliffes. It was to bring this technology to patients who need it. If partnership with Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals under new leadership advances that goal, then it would be irresponsible to reject it out of lingering bitterness. The following weeks brought rapid changes. The Neural Access Foundation officially launched with substantial funding from private donors and a matching grant from Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals. The FDA accelerated approval timeline remained on track, with expanded trials showing increasingly positive results. And Neurotech moved into larger facilities, finally able to focus on innovation rather than survival. Through it all, Mira found herself gradually adjusting to a new reality, one where she wasn't constantly braced for attack. The space this created in her life allowed other aspects to flourish, particularly her relationships with Zoe and Daniel. 3 months after the Radcliffes' resignation, Mira stood in the garden of the rehabilitation center where Isabella Vega had recently completed her final evaluation. The neural interface had rendered her seizure-free for over 4 months, allowing her to begin college applications and driving lessons. She wants to study neuroscience, Elena Vega said, watching her daughter chatting animatedly with other trial participants at the small celebration Neurotech had organized. Because of you, she has a future to plan for. Because of the technology, Mira corrected. And because of her own determination. And because you fought when it would have been easier to surrender. The judge's expression was solemn. Few people truly understand what you were up against. The Radcliffes' power and influence extended far beyond what most could comprehend. I had help. Myra's gaze found Daniel across the garden, where he was showing Zoe and several other children how the neural interface worked using a simplified demonstration model. I couldn't have done it alone. None of us can. That's the lesson I hope Isabella takes from all of this. Judge Vega smiled slightly. Speaking of not being alone, you and Dr. Frost seem to have developed quite a partnership. We have. Mira didn't elaborate, but her expression softened as she watched Daniel with her daughter. James would approve, the judge said quietly. Of everything you've built, including new connections. How would you know what James would think? Mira asked, curious rather than defensive. Because I knew him, briefly. He presented research at a medical ethics conference I attended years ago. His passion for accessible medical innovation was extraordinary. Judge Vega's smile was knowing. And anyone with that kind of passion would want it to continue, to grow, to find new expressions after they're gone. Later that evening, as Mira and Daniel walked through a nearby park while Zoe raced ahead to the playground, she found herself reflecting on the judge's words. Something on your mind? Daniel asked, his hand warm around hers. I was thinking about legacy. She watched Zoe climb confidently to the top of a play structure, waving triumphantly when she reached the summit. About how we measure the impact of our lives. Heavy thoughts for a beautiful evening. Not heavy. Actually, the opposite. She turned to face him. For years, I've been focused on preserving and protecting James's legacy, making sure his vision wasn't corrupted or erased. It was necessary, important work. It was. And you succeeded. Yes, but in the process, I almost missed something equally important. She squeezed his hand. That legacy isn't just about preserving the past. It's about building on it, expanding it, allowing it to evolve. Daniel's expression was open, patient. And what does that mean for you now? It means I'm ready to build something new. With you, if that's still what you want. His smile was answer enough, but his words confirmed it. It is. It has been since that first coffee after the court hearing, when you spent 2 hours explaining neural pathway modulation and didn't once check if I was following along. I was nervous, she admitted with a laugh. And you were intimidatingly brilliant. Pot, kettle. He pulled her closer. Are you sure about this, Mira? About us? I am. Zoe is too, in case you were wondering. She informed me last week that you make acceptable dad material because you know about space and how the brain works. Daniel laughed, the sound warm in the evening air. High praise indeed. The highest, coming from her. Myra's expression grew serious. It won't be simple, Daniel. The Radcliffes may be gone, but building Neurotech, working with the foundation, raising Zoe, it's a complex life. I don't want simple. I want real. His hand cupped her cheek gently. I want the brilliant scientist who fights corporate giants, the devoted mother who never misses a science fair, the woman who carries grief and joy in equal measure. All of you, complexity included. As they sealed their new beginning with a kiss, Zoe's delighted whoop from the playground made them break apart, laughing. She was racing toward them, face alight with the simple joy of movement and freedom. Mom! Dr. Daniel! I went all the way across the monkey bars without falling. Did you see? We did, Mira confirmed, lifting her daughter into a hug when she reached them. You were amazing. Like a neuroscientist in training, Daniel added, his hand coming to rest naturally on Zoe's shoulder. Looking at them together, Mira felt a certainty she hadn't experienced in years. The Neural Access Foundation was securing James's legacy for patients worldwide. Neurotech was advancing the technology beyond what either of them had initially imagined. And here, in this park with Daniel and Zoe, another kind of legacy was taking shape, one that honored the past while embracing a future full of unexpected possibilities. The Radcliffes had dragged her to bankruptcy court to destroy her, never imagining that there, before a judge who recognized both her company's value and her personal integrity, Mira Kapoor would find not an ending, but the first of many new beginnings. If this story of perseverance against overwhelming odds resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Echoes of the Heart with Dr. Collins. In the comments, share a time when you had to stand up against powerful forces for what you believed in. Did you have allies who helped you through the darkest moments? Remember, sometimes our greatest strength comes not from fighting alone, but from building connections that sustain us through life's most challenging battles.